I don't remember the crash. That's the first thing everyone kept telling me after I woke up in the hospital. Like it was supposed to comfort me somehow. Like forgetting the moment your life split in half was a blessing instead of the most terrifying thing imaginable. What I do remember is opening my eyes to fluorescent lights and a pounding headache so brutal I thought my skull had cracked open. My throat was dry. My body felt heavy. There were wires stuck to my chest, a machine beeping beside me, and a guy sitting in the chair near the window staring at me like he hadn't slept in days. The weird part wasn't that he was there. The weird part was the look on his face when I woke up. Relief. Panic. Hope. Fear. All at once. "Clyde?" he said carefully. His voice was rough, exhausted. Like he'd been talking too much or crying too much. Maybe both. I blinked at him slowly. He was handsome in a tired kind of way. Dark hair falling messily over his forehead. Hoodie wrinkled. Eyes red around the edges. He looked about my age, maybe mid-20s, but there was something about the way he looked at me that made my chest feel strangely tight. Like I should know him. But I didn't. "Who are you?" I asked. The silence after that was horrible. I still remember it perfectly. His expression didn't shatter dramatically like in movies. It was quieter than that. More human. Like somebody slowly pulling the floor out from under him. "You don't remember me?" he asked. I frowned immediately because guilt hit me before anything else. Pure instinct. I could tell my answer was about to hurt him. "I'm sorry," I said weakly. "Should I?" He looked away fast, rubbing a hand over his mouth. That was when a nurse walked in, probably saving both of us. "Oh good, you're awake," she said brightly, checking monitors before looking at the guy near the window. "Blake, give him a little space, okay? Doctor will want to talk to him first." Blake. The name meant nothing to me. But the second I heard it, something weird happened in my chest. A pull. A flicker. Like my brain was trying to reach for something just out of sight. Blake stood slowly. "Yeah. Of course." He looked back at me one more time before leaving the room. And I swear that look haunted me long before I understood why. The doctor explained things in fragments because my head still hurt too badly to process everything. Car accident. Rain. Truck ran a red light. Concussion. Broken collarbone. Memory loss. Temporary amnesia isn't uncommon after trauma, the doctor explained. Most memories return gradually. Sometimes quickly. Sometimes slowly. I nodded like I understood. Truthfully, I barely understood my own name. Apparently I was 24 years old. I lived in Seattle. I worked remotely doing graphic design work. My parents lived 2 states away and were already flying in. And Blake? The doctor hesitated slightly when I asked. "Your boyfriend was in the ambulance with you." Boyfriend. I stared at him. "My what?" The doctor blinked. "Your boyfriend. Blake." I actually laughed because I thought he had to be joking. But he wasn't. "No," I said immediately. "I think you mixed me up with somebody else. You've been together almost 3 years." "No," I repeated, more confused now than confident. "I'm not gay." The doctor gave me the kind of careful expression people use around injured animals. "Memory loss can affect emotional continuity too," he said gently. "You may not currently connect to parts of your identity that were previously very important to you." That sentence made my stomach twist. Because suddenly I remembered something. Not Blake. Not the accident. Just flashes. Sneaking glances at boys in high school locker rooms. Deleting browser history obsessively at 16. The panic I used to feel anytime somebody called me soft. My pulse started racing. "No," I whispered again, but this time I wasn't sure who I was trying to convince. Blake came back later that evening. I pretended to be asleep at first because I didn't know how to face him. But I could hear him moving quietly around the room, adjusting flowers somebody had brought. Sitting back in the chair. Waiting. Finally I opened my eyes. He looked exhausted. You don't have to stay, I said awkwardly. Okay, he answered instantly. But he didn't move. That almost made me smile. Almost. The silence stretched too long. Then he finally spoke carefully. Do you remember anything at all? I shook my head. Not really. He nodded slowly like he'd already expected that answer. You remember your apartment? No. Your job? Barely. What about? He stopped himself. What? His jaw tightened slightly. Nothing. I studied him more carefully then. Blake wasn't dramatic looking. He wasn't model perfect. But there was something incredibly grounding about him. Solid shoulders. Warm brown eyes. The kind of face that probably looked even better when he smiled. I had the strange feeling I'd seen that smile 1,000 times before. But there was just nothing. Blank space. You really loved me? I asked before thinking. The question clearly caught him off guard. What? I mean, I swallowed awkwardly. The doctor said we were together for 3 years. Blake stared at me for a second before giving a quiet laugh that sounded painful. Yeah, he said softly. You really did. Something about the way he said it made my chest ache unexpectedly. I looked down at my blanket. I'm sorry. Stop apologizing. But I forgot you. His eyes shut briefly at that. God. Wrong thing to say. I know, he answered quietly. The room felt unbearably tense after that. Then Blake reached into his hoodie pocket and pulled out his phone. You used to do this thing, he said carefully. Whenever you got anxious, you'd ask to see pictures because visuals helped ground you. He held the phone out toward me. I hesitated before taking it. The lock screen was me. Not a posed photo either. I was half asleep on a couch wrapped in a blanket burrito, glaring at the camera while holding a bag of chips. Under the picture, small white text read, "My favorite person." My throat tightened immediately. Blake looked away like he couldn't bear watching my reaction. Hands slightly shaky, I unlocked the phone he'd already opened to photos. And suddenly there were hundreds of us. Selfies at restaurants. Road trips. Beach pictures. Me asleep on his chest. Blake kissing my cheek while I laughed at the camera. Christmas mornings. Birthdays. Tiny stupid moments that only couples photograph because they matter to nobody else. But apparently they mattered to us. To me. I stared at one photo longer than the others. We were in bed. Blake was shirtless. I was half hidden under blankets, clearly annoyed he was taking pictures so early in the morning. But the thing that hit me hardest wasn't the intimacy. It was the way I looked at him. Completely safe. Completely in love. I couldn't remember feeling that way. And somehow that was worse than remembering nothing at all. Blake saw the photo in my hands and smiled faintly for the first time all day. You hated mornings, he said quietly. You'd get so grumpy if I woke you up before coffee. I looked at him. You remember all that? Every detail. That answer hurt way more than it should have. Because suddenly I realized something awful. One of us still had 3 years together. The other one had absolutely nothing. The first night after Blake left, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those photos again. Not just saw them. Felt them. Like my brain was scratching at something buried deep underneath the surface. I kept staring at the ceiling while hospital machines beeped softly around me, trying to understand how somebody could lose an entire person. How you could apparently love someone enough to build a life with them, and then wake up one morning feeling absolutely nothing. That thought made me feel sick. Because Blake clearly still loved me. I could see it in every look he gave me. And I had no idea what to do with that. My parents arrived the next morning. Mom cried immediately. Dad hugged me too hard because he was trying not to cry too. They asked a million questions, and for a little while it distracted me from the Blake situation entirely. Until Mom casually said, "Where's Blake?" The room went awkwardly quiet. Dad glanced at me carefully. He went home to shower, he explained. Kid hasn't left this hospital except to get coffee. Something about that twisted painfully in my chest again. Mom sat beside me on the bed. Honey, the doctors explained things to us. Don't pressure yourself, okay? Blake understands. I doubted that. Nobody understands being forgotten. Blake came back that afternoon carrying an overnight bag and iced coffee for my mom because apparently he knew her usual order. That was somehow more intimate than all the kissing photos. He paused awkwardly when he saw me awake. Hey. God, we sounded like strangers. My parents clearly noticed too because Mom immediately stood. We're gonna grab food downstairs. Dad gave Blake a sympathetic clap on the shoulder as they left. Then it was just us again. Blake set the bag down quietly. Your laptop's in here. Figured maybe seeing your stuff would help. Thanks. Another silence. I hated how many silences existed between us now. Finally, I asked the thing that had been bothering me all night. Were we happy? Blake looked genuinely surprised. Yeah, he answered instantly. No offense, but people say that even when relationships are falling apart. A tiny smile pulled at the corner of his mouth. That sounds like something you'd say. The weird thing was, hearing that made me feel warm for a second. Like maybe I was still somewhere inside myself. Blake sat carefully in the chair beside my bed again. We fought sometimes, he admitted. Usually because you overworked yourself and forgot to eat. That sounds believable. You're stubborn as hell. I gathered that already. He laughed softly. And there it was again. That awful ache in my chest. Because his laugh sounded familiar. Not recognizable exactly. Just familiar enough to hurt. Blake noticed me staring. What? I don't know, I admitted honestly. Sometimes I feel like I almost remember something. Then it disappears. His expression softened instantly. That's good, right? Maybe. Truthfully, it scared me. Because what if I remembered everything except loving him? Over the next few days, Blake became impossible not to notice. Not in some dramatic movie way. In normal ways. The way he automatically fixed my blanket whenever it slid down. The way he remembered exactly how I liked my coffee even when I couldn't remember myself. The way he always checked my expression when doctors explained things too quickly, like he already knew I got overwhelmed easily. 3 years of loving somebody had trained him to notice me in terrifying detail. And I noticed him noticing me. That was the dangerous part. One evening he was helping me walk slowly down the hospital hallway when dizziness hit me suddenly. I stumbled slightly. Blake caught me instantly. One arm around my waist. Steady. Warm. You okay? He asked quietly. And for one terrifying second, my body reacted before my brain did. Comfort. Safety. My fingers tightened instinctively against his hoodie. Blake felt it too. I could tell. His eyes flicked down to my hand gripping him. Then back to my face. Neither of us moved. Something sharp flashed through my head suddenly. Blake pinning me against the kitchen counter laughing while I tried stealing food off his plate. Warm hands. His voice in my ear. A kiss against my neck. The image vanished so fast it made my head spin. I jerked away immediately. Clyde? I'm fine, I said too quickly. But I wasn't. Because for half a second, I felt something. Not memory exactly. More like emotional muscle memory. Like my body remembered Blake even if my mind didn't. And honestly, that scared me more than forgetting him. That night I opened the laptop Blake brought me. The password was easy apparently because my fingers typed it automatically before my brain consciously remembered it. Blake and coffee. I stared at the screen for a long moment after it unlocked. Jesus Christ. Apparently I'd been disgustingly in love. There were folders everywhere. Trips. Videos. Random selfies. One folder simply called Idiot. I opened it. It was entirely photos of Blake sleeping in weird positions. I actually laughed out loud. Then immediately felt guilty for laughing without him there. I clicked another file before I could stop myself. A video opened. Blake appeared on screen sitting on our couch wearing sweatpants while eating cereal straight from the box. "Clyde," he said around a mouthful of food, "if you're recording me to bully me later, I need you to know I look incredibly hot right now." My own voice laughed behind the camera. "You look homeless. You still want to marry me, though?" There was a pause. Then my voice answered softly. "Yeah. I do." My breath caught. The video kept going, but I barely heard the rest. Marry me. We were talking about marriage like it was normal. Casual. Real. My chest started hurting so badly I shut the laptop. Because suddenly Blake wasn't just some guy everyone claimed I loved. He was someone I planned a future with. And I couldn't remember a single second of it. A few days later, the doctor finally cleared me to go home. Home. That word felt strange now. Blake drove us back to the apartment because my parents had already flown home for work. The entire ride was painfully quiet except for low music playing through the speakers. I kept sneaking glances at him while he drove. He looked exhausted still. But underneath that exhaustion was something worse. Fear. Like he was terrified every second that I'd look at him and decide I didn't want him anymore. The realization made my stomach twist. When we finally reached the apartment building, Blake hesitated before turning off the engine. "You don't have to stay with me if it's weird," he said carefully. "I can crash somewhere else until you're comfortable." The fact he was willing to leave his own home for my comfort nearly broke me. "No," I said quickly. "I mean, this is your apartment too." "Our apartment," he corrected softly. "Right. Our apartment." Blake unlocked the door slowly. The second we stepped inside, another sharp wave hit me. Coffee smell. Laundry detergent. The soft yellow lamp near the couch. And Blake's shoes kicked carelessly near the door. A strange warmth rushed through me so suddenly I almost lost balance. Because this place felt familiar. Not fully remembered. But familiar enough that my chest physically hurt. Blake noticed my expression immediately. "What is it?" I swallowed hard. "I think I know this place." Hope exploded across his face so fast it honestly scared me. "You do?" "A little." His eyes actually watered. And before I could react, he stepped toward me instinctively like he wanted to hug me. Then stopped himself halfway. The hesitation hurt more than if he touched me. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, backing away. Habit. But the truth was, for one tiny second before he stopped, I think I wanted him to do it. Living with Blake felt like walking through someone else's life while wearing my face. Everywhere I looked, there was evidence of us. Photos on the fridge. My hoodie mixed into his laundry. A stupid cactus on the kitchen windowsill with googly eyes glued onto the pot. "What the hell is that?" I asked the first morning home. Blake looked over from the coffee machine and smiled faintly. "You named him Fernando." "I named a cactus?" "You got attached after 2 margaritas." I stared at the cactus for a long moment. Then quietly asked, "Is Fernando okay?" Blake laughed so suddenly he nearly spilled coffee everywhere. And for the first time since waking up in the hospital, the tension between us cracked a little. It felt normal. Dangerously normal. The apartment itself wasn't huge. 1 bedroom. Cozy kitchen. Soft lighting everywhere. It looked like 2 people had built an actual life there together instead of just sharing space. That realization followed me constantly. Especially at night. Because Blake insisted on sleeping on the couch. "You don't have to," I told him the first evening. "It's fine." "Blake." He looked up from unfolding blankets slowly. "You forgot me, Clyde," he said gently. "I'm not gonna pressure you into sharing a bed with a stranger." That word hit harder than he probably intended. Stranger. Because technically he was right. But somehow he didn't feel like one. That was the problem. The first week home settled into something awkward but weirdly domestic. Blake worked remotely from the dining table while I recovered on the couch pretending not to stare at him constantly. I learned things about him all over again. He mumbled to himself while answering emails. He always stole fries off my plate instead of ordering his own. He had a tiny scar near his chin from falling off a skateboard at 14. And apparently he loved touching me absent-mindedly. Not romantically even. Just naturally. A hand on my shoulder while passing behind me. Fingers brushing my wrist when handing me coffee. Knees bumping mine on the couch. Every single touch affected me way more than it should have. Because my body reacted before my brain did. Always. One night we were watching some terrible reality dating show when Blake started laughing so hard he leaned sideways against me instinctively. His head landed briefly on my shoulder. The second it happened, we both froze. Blake pulled away immediately. Sorry. But my pulse was already racing. Because another flash hit me. Late night laughter. His weight against me in bed. My fingers in his hair. A kiss pressed lazily against his forehead while Netflix played in the background. The memory disappeared instantly again. But this time I grabbed my head sharply. Clyde? Blake sat up fast. I saw something. His entire expression changed. What? I don't know. I squeezed my eyes shut. You were there. We were watching TV maybe. Hope flickered across his face again. Dangerous, fragile hope. What else? I can't. Frustration hit me immediately. I can't hold on to it long enough. Blake studied me carefully for a second before speaking softly. You used to play with my hair when I couldn't sleep. My stomach tightened instantly. Because that felt right. Too right. I did. Yeah. He smiled faintly. Said it made me less grumpy. You seem grumpy anyway. That's because you forgot me. The joke landed badly. His smile disappeared immediately afterward. So that's where we are now? I asked quietly. Blake rubbed a hand over his face. Sorry. I didn't mean. No, it's fine. But it wasn't. Because underneath all his patience and kindness, I could feel the grief leaking out of him sometimes. And honestly, I deserved it. A few nights later, I woke up thirsty around 2 in the morning. The apartment was dark except for soft city lights filtering through the windows. I walked quietly toward the kitchen before noticing Blake asleep on the couch. Except he wasn't really asleep. The TV glowed dimly while he stared blankly at the screen. You okay? I asked softly. He looked startled. Yeah. Lie. I leaned against the kitchen counter. You can tell me the truth. Blake looked away. Then finally admitted quietly. This just really hurts. There it was. Raw. Honest. Not angry. Which somehow made it worse. I know. No, you don't. The words slipped out sharper than he intended. He immediately exhaled hard. Sorry. I stayed quiet. Blake stared down at his hands. You look at me like you're trying to decide if I'm safe every single day. That hurt because it was true. And I know it's not your fault. He continued quietly. But sometimes I catch myself wanting you to touch me the way you used to, and then I remember you don't even remember kissing me. The room felt painfully small after that confession. Blake laughed bitterly under his breath. God, that sounds pathetic. It's not pathetic. His eyes finally lifted to mine. I miss you, he said softly. The honesty in his voice nearly wrecked me. Because I could tell he meant the old version of me. The version that loved him back automatically. And I had no idea how to become that person again. The next morning things were awkward. Blake kept extra distance between us like he regretted saying too much. Which somehow felt worse than the tension itself. By evening I couldn't stand it anymore. Do you regret being with me? Blake looked up immediately from his laptop. What? You heard me. He stared at me like I'd lost my mind. Clyde. I'm serious. Blake shut the laptop slowly. Why would you even ask that? Because maybe this whole thing made you realize you're happier without me. The silence after that was intense. Then Blake stood abruptly and walked toward me. Not aggressive. Certain. You want to know the first thing you said to me after our first date? He asked. I blinked. What? You told me you hated how easy it was to talk to me. My chest tightened unexpectedly. Blake stopped directly in front of me now. You said it scared you. I swallowed hard. Then what happened? His eyes softened painfully. Then you kissed me in the parking lot for like 5 straight minutes. Heat rushed into my face instantly. Blake smiled faintly. And afterward you got embarrassed and blamed the tequila. I laughed despite myself. But then he said quietly, You've been my favorite person since the night I met you, Clyde. The room went still. Because suddenly I remembered something again. Not fully. Just sensations. Rainy air. Blake's hands gripping my jacket. My own heartbeat racing. An overwhelming warmth the second our mouths touched. I inhaled sharply. Blake noticed immediately. What? My hand moved to my chest instinctively. I think I remember kissing you. His expression cracked completely. Not dramatic. Just overwhelmed. Like he wanted to hope but was terrified to. What do you remember? He asked quietly. Rain, maybe. Parking lot. Blake stared at me for a second before laughing softly in disbelief. It poured that night. Something emotional twisted hard inside me. Then, before I could overthink it, I asked the question that had secretly been haunting me for days. Were you my first boyfriend? Blake looked surprised again. Yeah. Oh. You okay? I looked down at my hands honestly. I think I'm trying to figure out if I fell in love with you slowly, or all at once. Blake's face softened in a way that nearly destroyed me. Definitely all at once, he whispered. And for some reason, I believed him instantly. After that conversation, something shifted between us. Not fixed. Definitely not normal. But softer. Like we stopped pretending this was temporary. A few days later, Blake convinced me to go outside for the first time since the accident. Doctors said fresh air would help, he said while handing me a hoodie. I think doctors just say that when they run out of useful advice. Blake snorted. You always get grumpy when you're nervous. I'm not nervous. You're wearing 2 different socks. I looked down immediately. Blake burst out laughing. And embarrassingly enough, hearing him laugh like that made me smile too. We walked slowly through a small park near the apartment, while cold Seattle wind pushed through the trees. It felt strangely intimate doing something so normal together. Couples passed us occasionally. Joggers. Dog walkers. And every time someone looked at us, I caught myself wondering what they saw. Did we still look like a couple? Did Blake still instinctively walk slightly closer to traffic because he was protective? Had I always matched my pace to his naturally? 3 years creates habits even memory loss apparently can't erase. At one point Blake reached toward me automatically while crossing the street. His hand brushed mine. Then stopped. Like he remembered halfway through that he wasn't sure he was allowed anymore. Something about that hesitation hurt more than the touch itself. So before I could overthink it, I grabbed his hand first. Blake froze instantly. I almost did too. Because the second our hands fully connected, another violent flash hit me. His fingers tangled with mine in movie theaters, pulling him through crowds. My thumb rubbing absent-minded circles against his skin in bed. Years of tiny unconscious affection slammed into me all at once. I sucked in a sharp breath. Clyde? Blake looked panicked now. Are you okay? I couldn't answer immediately. Because suddenly holding his hand felt terrifyingly natural. Not unfamiliar. Not forced. Natural. I swallowed hard. I think we did this a lot. Blake stared at me silently. Then very quietly. Yeah. Neither of us let go. That night I found myself unable to stop thinking about closeness. Not anything physical exactly. Just intimacy. The easy kind. The kind people build over years. Because the more flashes I got back, the more one thing became obvious. I touched Blake constantly. And apparently he touched me constantly too. It was woven into everything. A hand on his neck while passing him in the kitchen. His arm around my waist while cooking. Kisses between conversations. The realization made my chest ache with confusion. Because emotionally I still felt lost sometimes. But physically? My body knew him. Around midnight I wandered into the kitchen for water, and found Blake sitting on the couch again, unable to sleep. "You always do this?" I asked quietly. He glanced up. "Do what?" "Pretend Netflix is therapy." A faint smile appeared. "You remembered that?" "No." I grabbed water from the fridge. "Just feels accurate." Blake laughed softly. I leaned against the counter studying him. Sweatpants. Messy hair. Tired eyes. Comfortingly familiar. Dangerously attractive. That last thought hit me out of nowhere so hard I nearly choked on my water. Blake noticed immediately. "You okay?" "Yep." Lie. Because suddenly I was noticing details differently. The way his forearms flexed when he moved. The soft stubble along his jaw. The fact his hoodie collar slipped enough to reveal skin near his neck. And worse. Part of me clearly already knew what that skin tasted like. Jesus Christ. I looked away fast. Blake watched me carefully now. "You sure you're okay?" "I just remembered something weird." His expression sharpened instantly. "What?" I hesitated. Then decided honesty was probably safer. "I remembered kissing your neck." The silence afterward was brutal. Blake blinked at me slowly. "Oh." Heat flooded my face immediately. "Yeah." His throat moved visibly when he swallowed. "That's progress?" "I guess." Neither of us knew where to look suddenly. Then Blake quietly said, "You used to bite sometimes." I stared at him. Blake immediately regretted speaking. "Sorry. Ignore me." But now my brain betrayed me completely. Another flash. Blake laughing breathlessly while I kissed down his throat. My hands under his shirt. His voice low in my ear saying my name. The memory hit so vividly my knees actually felt weak. "Holy shit," I whispered. Blake stood immediately. "What happened?" I remembered more. His entire face changed. "What kind of more?" I looked at him helplessly because saying it out loud felt impossible. But Blake already understood. I could see it happen in real time. "Oh," he said softly. The room suddenly felt way too warm. The next few days became unbearable in the strangest way possible. Because now attraction had entered the situation. Real attraction. Not abstract. Not theoretical. I wanted Blake. And apparently I always had. That should have been comforting. Instead, it made everything more complicated. Because every little thing affected me now. His hand brushing my back. The smell of his shampoo. Hearing him laugh from another room. One evening I was sitting cross-legged on the couch trying to answer work emails when Blake walked out of the shower wearing gray sweatpants and nothing else. My brain completely stopped functioning. Water still dripped from his hair down his chest. And without warning, a full memory crashed into me. Blake pinned beneath me in these exact sweatpants while I kissed him breathless. My hands everywhere. His voice wrecked and desperate saying, "Clyde, bedroom." "Now." I inhaled sharply. Blake noticed instantly. "Another memory?" I looked at him in horror. He looked at me in horror. Because apparently my face answered for me. "Oh my God!" Blake muttered, grabbing the nearest shirt immediately. "That's not helping now," I blurted. Silence. Then Blake laughed so hard he doubled over. And somehow that made me laugh too. For like 30 straight seconds we just stood there laughing helplessly in the middle of the apartment. The tension cracked open completely. God, I'd missed this. Except technically I'd never remembered it in the first place. Eventually Blake wiped his eyes and looked at me softly. "There you are." The words hit me harder than they should have. Because for the first time since the accident, I finally felt a little like myself again. Later that night, we ended up sitting unusually close together on the couch. Not touching, but close enough that I could feel his warmth. The movie playing was completely ignored by both of us. Finally, I spoke quietly. "Can I ask you something?" "Anything." "After the accident." I swallowed hard. "Did you think we were over?" Blake was silent for a moment. "Honestly?" Yeah, he admitted softly. "I thought the second you looked at me and felt nothing, that was it." That hurt to hear. Because maybe a part of me had felt nothing at first. But not anymore. Definitely not anymore. I looked down at my hands. "I don't think I feel nothing." Blake went very still beside me. "You don't?" My heart started pounding. "No." The room felt electric suddenly. Blake turned toward me slowly. "Clyde, I still don't remember everything," I said quickly. "But when I'm with you, sometimes it feels like my brain catches up to feelings I already have." His expression completely softened. And before I could panic, Blake reached up carefully and touched my face. Gentle. Slow enough for me to pull away if I wanted. I didn't. His thumb brushed my cheek softly while he searched my expression. "You know what the worst part was?" he whispered. "What?" "Even after you forgot me." His voice cracked slightly. "You still looked exactly at me the same way." My chest physically hurt hearing that. Because suddenly I realized something terrifying. Maybe love didn't fully live in memory. Maybe some parts stayed deeper than that. After that night on the couch, pretending things were platonic became impossible. Not because either of us said anything dramatic, but because everything changed in the quiet moments. The looks lasted longer. The touches lingered. And every time Blake smiled at me now, something warm unraveled painfully inside my chest. It felt less like falling in love and more like realizing I already had been. A few evenings later we ordered takeout and sat on the kitchen floor because apparently our dining chairs were uncomfortable and spiritually ugly. "That sounds like something I'd say," I admitted. Blake laughed. "You said it after 2 glasses of wine and then refused to sit there for 3 weeks." I grinned despite myself. It still amazed me how naturally we fit together conversationally. Like no matter how much memory I lost, the rhythm between us stayed untouched. At some point Blake reached over automatically to wipe sauce off the corner of my mouth. His thumb brushed my lip. Both of us froze instantly. The air shifted. My pulse started hammering. Because suddenly I remembered another flash. Blake kissing me breathless against this exact kitchen counter. My hands gripping his hoodie. His voice laughing softly between kisses because I kept getting distracted halfway through making dinner. The memory hit so hard I sucked in a breath. Blake noticed immediately. "Another one?" I nodded slowly. His eyes searched mine carefully. "Good memory?" Heat rushed into my face. That answered the question for him. Blake looked away fast, jaw tightening slightly like he was trying very hard not to think too hard about it. But now the tension between us was unbearable. Because I could feel it. The attraction. The history. 3 years of intimacy sitting invisibly between us every second. And for the first time since the accident, I wanted to do something about it. Later that night we ended up on the couch again. Too close. Definitely too close. A movie played quietly while rain tapped against the windows, but neither of us were watching it. Blake's arm rested along the back of the couch behind me. Not touching. Just there. My heart wouldn't calm down. Finally I spoke softly. "Can I ask you something weird?" Blake glanced over. "Always. How did we say goodnight before?" His expression changed instantly. "You really want to know?" I nodded. Blake hesitated before answering carefully. "Usually you'd pretend you weren't tired." A small smile appeared. "Then you'd fall asleep halfway through talking." "That sounds embarrassing." "It was adorable." The word hit me harder than expected. Blake continued quietly. "And before bed." He stopped. "What?" His eyes flicked toward my mouth for half a second before returning upward. You always kiss me. The room went completely still. My chest tightened painfully. Every night? Pretty much. I stared at him silently. Because suddenly I realized something awful. My last memory before the accident probably included kissing him goodbye without knowing it might be the final time I'd remember him. God. Emotion rose so fast in my chest it caught me off guard. Blake noticed immediately. Hey! I forgot the last time, I whispered. His face softened instantly. Clyde, I forgot our last normal day together. Blake moved before I even realized it. 1 second he was beside me. The next his arms wrapped carefully around me while I buried my face against his shoulder. And the terrifying thing was, it felt completely right. Not awkward. Not unfamiliar. Right. I held onto him instinctively. Blake's hand slid slowly through my hair while he whispered softly against my temple. You're here now. My chest hurt so badly I could barely breathe. Because suddenly I didn't just miss my memories. I missed us. Neither of us moved for a long time. The rain outside filled the silence while Blake held me like it was the most natural thing in the world. Eventually I became painfully aware of how close we actually were. My face near his neck. His hand resting against my waist. Our legs tangled together on the couch. And unfortunately my body noticed too. I shifted awkwardly. Blake immediately pulled back slightly. Sorry. No, it's not that. His expression changed subtly. Oh. Heat flooded my face instantly. Blake looked like he was trying incredibly hard not to smile. This is deeply humiliating for me, I muttered. You think you're embarrassed? He asked softly. That made me look at him. Really look at him. His pupils were blown wide. Breathing uneven. And suddenly I realized. He wanted me too. Still. Even after all this. The realization hit me straight in the chest. Blake, I whispered. His eyes flicked to my mouth again. Everything after that happened slowly. Carefully. Like either of us wanted to break the moment by moving too fast. Blake lifted one hand to my face again, fingers brushing my jaw gently. You can stop me any time, he said quietly. The fact he said that nearly destroyed me. Because even now, after everything, he was still protecting me. I shook my head slightly. I don't want to stop you. Blake inhaled sharply. Then he kissed me. Soft at first. Tentative. Like he was terrified I might disappear again. And the second his mouth touched mine, everything exploded. Not full memories. Feelings. Warmth. Safety. Late nights tangled together in bed. Laughing against his lips. Hands grabbing hoodies. Forehead kisses in grocery store lines. Thousands of tiny moments wrapped inside one single kiss. A broken sound escaped my throat before I could stop it. Blake pulled back immediately, panic flashing across his face. Did I hurt you? No. My eyes burned suddenly. No, I grabbed his shirt without thinking. You feel familiar. The look on his face after that nearly shattered me completely. Blake kissed me again immediately. Still gentle. Still careful. But this time I kissed him back without hesitation. And apparently muscle memory is terrifyingly real. Because my hands already knew exactly where they belong. One slid into his hair automatically. The other gripped his waist. Blake made the softest sound against my mouth, and suddenly another flash hit me. Me pinning him into mattresses. Blake laughing breathlessly while telling me to shut up and kiss him properly. Mornings tangled together under blankets. My pulse raced violently. When we finally pulled apart, both of us were breathing hard. Blake rested his forehead carefully against mine. You remembered something else, he whispered. Yeah. Good? I laughed shakily. Very. His smile against my mouth felt almost relieved. And for the first time since waking up in that hospital, kissing him didn't feel like trying to remember someone. It felt like coming home. After we kissed, everything became quieter. Not less intense. just softer. Like some invisible wall between us finally cracked open. Blake kept his forehead against mine for a long moment, while both of us caught our breath. His hands rested carefully at my waist like he still couldn't fully believe this was real. And honestly, neither could I. Because somehow one kiss had changed everything. Or maybe it changed nothing at all. Maybe it just uncovered what was already there underneath the fear and confusion. Blake brushed his thumb gently against my side. "You okay?" I nodded slowly. "Yeah." Then after a second, "I think I missed that." His eyes softened immediately. "You used to say kissing fixed your mood. That sounds fake. It was usually followed by you demanding snacks." I laughed quietly. God, I loved hearing our history from him. Even the stupid little details. Especially those. We stayed curled together on the couch most of the night talking quietly while rain continued outside. About us. About how we met. Apparently our first date was supposed to be casual coffee and somehow turned into a 6-hour conversation because neither of us wanted to leave. "You talked with your hands a lot when you got excited," Blake said softly. "I still do that." "Yeah." He smiled. "That part never changed." I looked down at our intertwined fingers. "Were you scared too?" "Of what?" "Falling in love." Blake laughed quietly under his breath. "You were terrifying, Clyde." I blinked. "Excuse me?" "You looked at me like you could already tell I was screwed." That made me grin. Then Blake's expression softened again. "But honestly," he admitted quietly, "I think I loved you before I meant to." Something in my chest twisted hard. Because I could believe that. I could feel it every time he looked at me. Around 2 in the morning I finally stood to head toward the bedroom. Then stopped awkwardly. Because for the first time since coming home, I didn't want him sleeping on the couch anymore. Blake noticed my hesitation immediately. "What?" I looked away briefly before forcing myself to say it. "You can sleep in the bed tonight." The room went completely still. "Clyde, I want you to." His eyes searched mine carefully, probably making sure I wasn't forcing myself. The truth was simpler than that. I slept better near him. Even before I fully understood why. Blake stood slowly. "You sure?" I nodded. And the look of relief on his face nearly broke me all over again. The bedroom felt strangely intimate now in a way it hadn't before. Maybe because I finally understood what this room actually was to us. Our room. There were still traces of both of us everywhere. My clothes mixed with his. A framed photo on the nightstand of us grinning under Christmas lights. A tiny crack in the ceiling Blake said I used to complain about constantly. "You named it," he admitted while changing into sleep clothes. "I named a ceiling crack?" "You called him Gregory." I stared at him. Blake shrugged helplessly. "You get weird when you're sleep deprived." I laughed so hard I almost forgot to be nervous. Almost. Because then Blake climbed carefully into bed beside me. And suddenly all I could think about was the fact we'd shared this bed for years. Together. Every night. The realization sent warmth flooding through me. We lay there quietly for a while in the darkness. Close. Not touching yet. But aware of each other constantly. Then Blake spoke softly into the dark. "You used to steal all the blankets." "That sounds unlikely." "You literally wrapped yourself like a burrito every night." I smiled faintly. Then after a pause I asked quietly, "Did we ever talk about the future?" Blake went silent for a second. "Yeah." My chest tightened. "What kind of future?" His voice softened. "The boring kind." I turned slightly toward him. "What does that mean?" "It means we talked about apartments and dogs and whose turn it'd be to buy groceries." A faint laugh escaped him. "You wanted a golden retriever even though you hate dog hair." "That does sound like me." "And," he hesitated briefly, "we talked about getting married someday." Emotion hit me unexpectedly hard again. Not panic this time. Just grief for all the moments I lost. Blake must have noticed because his hand found mine carefully under the blankets. You don't have to remember everything tonight, he whispered. I know. But I wanted to. God, I wanted to. Because every memory I got back felt less like discovering something new and more like finding pieces of myself that had been missing. Without really thinking, I moved closer to him. Blake inhaled softly. My head settled naturally against his chest like I'd done it 1,000 times before. Maybe I had. His arm wrapped around me instinctively. Perfect fit. Perfect familiarity. And suddenly another memory surfaced. Waking up tangled together on Sunday mornings. Blake sleepy and warm beneath me. His voice rough with sleep asking me 5 more minutes before getting up. The flash faded slower this time. Gentler. I smiled against his shirt. What? Blake whispered. I remembered mornings. His heartbeat noticeably sped up beneath my cheek. Good mornings? Very good mornings. Blake laughed softly under his breath. Then after a second he pressed a kiss carefully into my hair. And unexpectedly, I remembered that too. Not one specific moment. Hundreds of them. Tiny affectionate kisses absent-mindedly scattered throughout ordinary days. The kind people do when love becomes second nature. My throat tightened painfully. Blake? Yeah? I think. I swallowed hard. I think even if I forgot the memories, I never really forgot how to love you. The silence after that felt enormous. Then Blake pulled me closer so tightly it almost hurt. His voice cracked quietly against my forehead. You have no idea how long I hoped you'd say that. I closed my eyes there against him while rain tapped softly against the windows. And for the first time since the accident, I wasn't scared anymore. The next morning, I woke up before Blake did. For a few seconds I stayed completely still, confused by the warmth pressed against me. Then reality settled slowly into place. His arm around my waist. My head on his chest. The soft sound of rain still falling outside. Blake. A strange emotion hit me so hard my throat tightened instantly. Because this felt familiar now. Not in flashes. Not in fragments. Real. I tilted my head slightly to look at him. He was still asleep, hair messy against the pillow, mouth slightly parted. One of his hands twitched faintly in his sleep before settling more firmly around me like even unconscious Blake didn't want to let go. And suddenly, another memory came back. Not dramatic. Not emotional. Just ordinary. Me waking up exactly like this before the accident. Watching him sleep while sunlight came through the blinds. Thinking I could do this forever. The realization hit so hard my eyes burned immediately. Because I remembered the feeling completely this time. Love. Simple. Certain. Deep enough to survive even when my mind didn't. I buried my face briefly against his shirt, trying not to completely lose it. Apparently I moved too much because Blake stirred awake slowly. His sleepy voice was rough. You okay? I laughed weakly. Yeah. He blinked down at me carefully. You're crying. Oh. Cool. That made him smile immediately. Then his expression softened when he saw I wasn't joking. Hey. His hand slid gently into my hair. What happened? I looked up at him finally. I remembered something. His whole body went still. What? I swallowed hard. Waking up next to you. The look on his face after that was devastating. Not because he looked sad. Because he looked relieved. Like he'd been holding his breath for weeks. You remembered us? He whispered. I nodded slowly. Not everything. My voice cracked slightly. But enough. Blake closed his eyes briefly like the emotion physically hurt. Then he pulled me against him so tightly I could barely breathe. And honestly, I held him just as hard. Recovery wasn't instant after that. I didn't suddenly regain every memory overnight. Some things came back quickly. Others only in pieces. But now it felt different. Because I wasn't trying to rebuild love from scratch anymore. I already knew it was there. The rest was just catching up. Over the next few weeks, more moments returned naturally. cooking together while dancing terribly in the kitchen. Movie marathons that ended with both of us asleep halfway through. The first time Blake told me he loved me. The first fight we ever had because I kept shutting people out when stressed. Road trips. Lazy Sundays. Thousands of tiny ordinary moments that somehow mattered more than the big ones. And through all of it, Blake stayed patient. Even on days when I got frustrated. Even when remembering hurt. Even when I woke up panicked because I couldn't fully piece certain things together yet. He never pushed. Never pressured. He just stayed. Exactly the way he always had. About 2 months after the accident, we went back to the park near our apartment. The same one where I grabbed his hand for the first time after forgetting him. Seattle air was cold enough that Blake complained every 30 seconds while pretending he wasn't cold. "You literally own 3 jackets," I pointed out. "And yet suffering builds character. You're dramatic. You love me." The words slipped out casually. Naturally. Neither of us stopped walking immediately after. But I felt Blake glance at me. Quietly hopeful. I looked over. And smiled. "Yeah," I said softly. "I really do." Blake stopped walking entirely after that. His eyes searched mine carefully like he still couldn't fully trust good things yet. "You remember saying that before too," he admitted quietly. "I know. Do you mean it now?" The answer came so easily it scared me a little. "I think I loved you before I even remembered your name." Blake laughed softly, eyes suspiciously bright. Then he pulled me closer by the front of my hoodie and kissed me right there in the middle of the sidewalk while cold rain misted around us. And this time, I remembered everything. Not every detail. Not every conversation. But the feeling. The certainty. The overwhelming, terrifying certainty that Blake was home to me in every version of my life. Even the broken ones. Even the forgotten ones. And honestly, maybe that was the scariest thing about love. How it stays. How it survives. How even after losing pieces of myself, some part of me still found its way back to him.